What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Bryce, and today I'm going to be reading Chapter 8 of the Parker Inheritance. Let's begin. Chapter 8. Candace had just bitten into her second oatmeal chocolate chip cookie when Brandon's sister entered the kitchen. She was too busy typing on her phone to notice them. Tori wore all black except for a pair of purple boots and a small silver pendant around her neck. Her hair was natural like Candace's mother's, but longer, with twists reaching down to her shoulders. She looked amazing. "I'm heading to work," she said, her thumbs flying across the screen. "One of the girls is sick, so I have to go in early." "Tori works at a clothing store at one of the strip malls," Brandon said to Candace. He was munching on a snickerdoodle. "I can't remember the name. They're all the same." Tori looked up. "Oh, hello there." Candace waved meekly. "Hi," she mumbled. A piece of cookie fell out of her mouth. She could have died. "We have company," Brandon said. "Yeah, thanks for the heads up on that," Tori said, pocketing her phone. "You could have told me." She stopped, marched across the kitchen, took Brandon's chin, and tilted his face up. The scratches were bleeding, but they were still red. "What happened?" He shook free of her grip. "I fell in a bush." "You're such a horrible liar." Tori turned to Candace. "Was it that little brat Milo?" "You don't have to answer that," Brandon said. "What does this look like, a courtroom?" Tori asked. Candace set down her cookie. "I don't know their names. Milo's the ringleader, about as big as my pinky, but really mean. Just like his older sister." Tori walked to the cabinet and pulled out a bottle of hydrogen peroxide. "You should have put something on those welts as soon as you got home." She doused a napkin, then began patting Brandon's face. "Mom and Granddad are going to have a fit." "Not if you don't tell them." "I don't have to tell them. They'll know once they see your face." Tori brushed a piece of grass out of his hair. "Let me talk to his sister. She's home from college this summer. I can probably convince her to get Milo to lay off." "Me getting my big sister to stop a bully? That'll really go over well with the guys at school." Tori kissed her brother on the cheek. "Will you look after him?" she asked Candace. "My brother's the brainiest kid I've ever met, but that clearly doesn't translate to street smarts." "Sure," Candace said. Then she clamped her mouth shut. What was she agreeing to? She had enough problems. She didn't want to add getting beat up to her list. "Thanks." Tori reached out her hand. "By the way, who are you?" "Candace Miller." She shook Tori's hand. "From across the street." Tori sized her up. "Let me know if you ever want to go shopping. I got a great discount. Though those shredded jeans are really cool. Kind of retro." Candace wanted to reach down and cover her knees. She wasn't used to getting compliments about her clothes. "They're comfortable." Brandon tapped the table. "Weren't you leaving?" Tori rolled her eyes. "Spoiled sport," she mouthed. She tugged on her brother's ear before wiping a cookie from his pile. "Hey, wait a second," he said as she reached the door. "Do you know when Granddad will be home?" "He's on his way now," Tori said. "I was just texting him." "Since when did Granddad learn how to text?" "Since Miss Kathy made him get a smartphone." She slung a bag over her shoulder. "Our Granddad's got a new girlfriend," she told Candace. Brandon shuddered. "That sounds strange. Old people aren't supposed to have girlfriends." "Okay," Tori said as she went out the door. "Next time I'll call her his lover." Even with the closed door between them, Candace could hear Tori's laugh loud and clear. Brandon's grandfather was nowhere near as cool as his granddaughter. He entered the house wearing a grungy white t-shirt and gray slides with red and blue suspenders, though his pants didn't seem to be at any risk of sliding off. He caught sight of Candace and Brandon at the table, and a large grin spread across his face. Then his eyes narrowed. "Boy, what in the world happened to your face?" Brandon tensed up. His mouth flapped open, but no words came out. "I tripped Brandon by accident," Candace said. "He fell into our holly bush." She guessed this was part of her duties in looking after Brandon. His grandfather grunted. "That's Brandon for you, always stumbling over his own two left feet. He went to the sink and washed his hands." "And you are Granddad. This is my friend Candace," Brandon said, from across the street. "Ah, Abigail Caldwell's granddaughter. Should have known that. You look just like her." He towed off as he walked to the table. "Rudolph Gibbs," he said, tipping his head toward Candace. "Nice to meet you." Mr. Gibbs reached over Candace and grabbed a cookie. He and his grandson favored each other in a lot of ways. Both carried slight builds, with heads shaped more like ovals than circles. Mr. Gibbs' hair was short like Brandon's, but way more white than black. A few large moles covered his dark skin. He smelled like cigarettes and gasoline. "Well, welcome to the neighborhood," he said, sitting down at the table. "There are plenty of kids around here to play with. Maybe you can get Brandon out there with you." "I go outside all the time," Brandon said. "Shooting hoops by yourself in the backyard don't count," Mr. Gibbs said. "In my day, me and my buddies would be all over the neighborhood. Wouldn't come home till dark. You kids nowadays," he nudged Candace, "ain't that right?" Sure," Candace said. "Mr. Gibbs, Brandon said you knew my grandmother pretty well." "Yep, she was good people." He broke his cookie in two. "It's a shame what happened to her." Candace didn't know if he was talking about her being fired or the heart attack that killed her. "If you don't mind me asking, did she ever tell you why she was let go from the city?" She and Brandon had decided earlier on a plan to approach his grandfather without revealing anything about the letter. "All I know is that it had to do with her tearing up Vickers Park," he said. "She claimed it was a mistake, but them good old boys in the city office was probably waiting for any chance to fire her. A lot of them didn't like a black woman telling them what to do." Candace reached for the hole at her knee and pulled at one of the strands. "Do people think she was, I don't know, incompetent, crazy?" He took a long time chewing the rest of his cookie before responding. "I won't lie, most of us were right perplexed. People couldn't understand how the city manager could screw up so much that she'd tear up a perfectly good tennis court. But when they followed the paper trail, the work order led right back to her." He reached for another cookie. "It was a good that she left town. A lot of folks in Vista Heights weren't too pleased. Vickers Park has been around for a long time. During the time of Jim Crow, it was the only public place where blacks could peacefully meet. There was no way we would have been allowed to step foot in those other parks. Those were for whites only." Candace thought about some of the books she read about the civil rights era. She wondered if black kids had ever tried to use the white-only parks, and if so, what happened to them? Did police use water cannons and dogs to attack them, like they had in other places in the South? "Okay, thanks for letting us know," she said. She looked at Brandon and gave a quick nod. "On the plan B." "Hey, Granddad, do you have a few more minutes?" Brandon asked. "I wanted to talk to you about some of the old families that used to live here." "Really? What for?" "Just a research project," he said, not looking at his grandfather. "A trace your roots sort of thing." Tori was right. Brandon was a horrible liar. A research project for school in the summer? His grandfather leaned back in his chair. "You should give cousin Lucretia a ring. She's already completed our family tree all the way back to the 1800s. Shoot, most of our family ain't even from here." "Well, it's not really focused on our family history, more like researching some of the other families from Lambert. I figured since Candace didn't have anything else going on this summer, maybe she could help me with the investigating." Okay, now I get it, he grinned. How about this? I've been at Chuck's all morning, helping him replace the transmission of his old Plymouth Barracuda. Let me spruce up a bit, and I'll be back down. He winked at Brennan. That'll give you a chance to have a little more, privacy, and then I'll answer my questions you got for me. The two of them nodded. Once Mr. Gibbs left the kitchen, Brandon picked up a cookie and stuffed it into his mouth, and then another after that. Candace stopped him before he could eat a third. Okay, what just happened? Wait, he whispered. A minute later, their house shook a little, and the pipes inside the walls groaned. Okay, Granddad's in the shower, he said. Sorry about that. Granddad always acts funny when I bring girlfriends over. He paused, then said, Not girlfriends, I meant girl, big space, friends. Girls that happen to be friends. I mean, friends that happen to be girls. Candace recalled how he had winked at Brennan. My dad's the opposite, she said. There's no way he would let me and a boy sit in the same room without adult supervision. They became quiet, and Candace wondered if they had both spoken too much. She was pretty sure Brennan didn't like her like that. She surely didn't like him in that way. But before she could say anything to fill the awkward void, Brennan opened his backpack, pulled out a book, and flipped to the first page. Rudolph Gibbs re-entered the kitchen wearing a clean white t-shirt and another pair of slacks and suspenders. As he walked to the refrigerator, Brennan placed his book face down and pushed it closer to Candace. She put her hand on top of it and pulled the book the rest of the way to her. Mr. Gibbs poured iced tea into a mason jar. All right, what do you want to know? He asked. Did you know the Allens? Brennan asked. Mr. Gibbs whistled. Ah, the Allens. Russell Allen passed away a few years ago after we moved here. He was an important man. He settled at the table. Of course, I didn't really know him. The Allens were a whole different type of white people. A little too blue blood for us regular folks. From what I understand, Russell's daughter ran the family business after he died. She was the only halfway decent one. Most black folks steered clear of Russell Allen's sons. Do they still live in town? Candace asked. Maybe a few cousins, but the ones with all the money, Russell Allen and his kids, have died or have moved away. He paused to drink his tea. Not that they were really that rich in the end, because they lost some contracts, Candace asked. As a matter of fact, that's right. Mr. Gibbs placed his glass on the table. Who told you that? I found some documents in Grandma's attic that mentioned it, Candace said. That's how I got roped into Brandon's project. What about a man named Enoch Washington? Have you ever heard of him or his wife, Leanne? Candace wasn't even going to try to say Siobhan's name or Siobhan's name. Rudolph Gibbs' forehead furrowed, so his eyebrows bunched together. He wiped some condensation from the glass. I didn't know him. We moved here long after he'd been. We know, Candace said. He was forced to leave town. Things were different back then, Mr. Gibbs said. I know y'all have seen the TV specials and read all the books, but there's a big difference between reading about life in the 50s and 60s and living it. We were supposed to mind our place, with our heads bowed and mouths closed. When we didn't, bad things happened. He finished his tea, then rattled the ice in the jar. Since you're asking so many questions, I assume you know Marion Allen, Russell's oldest, the one missing an eye. Ran him out of the city. Missing an eye? Candace hadn't expected to hear that. We knew it was the Allens, but we didn't have a name, she said. Do you know when it happened? Brennan asked. Late 50s, I think, Mr. Gibbs said. Not really sure. Folks didn't like to talk about stuff that when I got here. Even without a bunch of money, the Allens were still plenty powerful. Plus, no one had proof. Or if they did, no one brought it forward, he shrugged. Big Dub and his family were gone, and they weren't coming back. What was the point in dredging up the past? Big who? Brennan asked. Big Dub. That's what they used to call him. With a name like Enoch, I go by Big Dub too. Mr. Gibbs let out a soft, sad chuckle. If you really want to know more about him, you should check out the memorial at Lambert High. He turned to Candace. Dub was a teacher and coach at Perkins High. When they finally shut down Perkins and Wallace to create a new high school, someone kicked in a bunch of money to upgrade the building and create a special memorial for Perkins. Candace and Brandon looked at each other. She could tell he was wondering the same thing she was. Was this tied to the mysterious benefactor from the library? Why did they create a special memorial? She asked. Perkins was one of the first schools for black children in the region, maybe even the state, he said. Those colored schools are a big part of our history, Granddad. Brennan said with a sigh. You should say African American. Mr. Gibbs gave his grandson a long, hard look. Son, if the worst thing you've ever been called is colored, then you should consider yourself very, very lucky. And that's chapter 8. So tomorrow I'll be reading chapter 9. And that's about it. Peace out.